lots of really interesting detail there about this individual, Tyler Robinson, that a family member had picked up on a confession and mentioned that Tyler Robinson had brought Charlie Kirk up at a dinner. This family member had felt that he was full of hate, and obviously a lot of information there about messages. So it feels like there's quite a lot of information. Well, listening to that was David Charter, the US editor of the Times in America, of course. He joins us now. David, a lot of detail there.
Yeah, I was very interested to hear how they described carvings on bullet casings, because this has been the subject of intense social media discussion over the last 24 hours. So you may have heard that one of the inscriptions was Bella Ciao. Well, listeners may know that this is an Italian folk song that was used by the resistance movement against the Nazi troops who occupied Italy in the Second World War. So it's viewed as an anti-Nazi freedom song, and that fits with what was on one of the other bullet casings, apparently, which was "Hey fascist!" ! So you can see, I think, there an insight into the mind of the person who carved those words. That those were unused bullets found with the rifle that they were talking about. So we're building up a picture of motive, which is, I'm sure, what's going to come out during this press conference is ongoing, and there will be questions now about the conclusions they're beginning to draw about the motive of the person who murdered Charlie Kirk.
And it was interesting as well just to hear some of that detail from Spencer Cox there about how this family member had come to them with information. Tell us a bit more about that, because I thought that was quite interesting.
Well, I can't tell you any more than you've just heard, but I think it speaks to what we've heard about a family member being part of law enforcement, or at least previously in their career. I don't know if that's going to come out in the rest of the press conference. I'm sorry, I'm not able to listen to it at the moment and tell you. But it was talking about conversations that were discovered on the Discord app, wasn't it, as well?
Yes.
I think they were talking about the location, about knowing about the abandonment of the rifle.
And also a family member talking about, hearing this confession and talking about this sort of the fact that Tyler Robinson apparently brought the fact that Kirk was coming to speak at this university at a dinner. But as you say, we will get more information on this. Now, look, there's more flesh on the bone in terms of who the suspect is. Now, there's going to be a lot of delving into this person's past. I mean, what do you think the kind of political ramifications of this are going to be, David?
Well, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of conclusions are going to be leapt to. It's going to confirm the suspicions of many on the right in America that this was indeed politically motivated by a liberal American who disagreed violently, as it turns out, in a deadly way with Charlie Kirk. So then on the next level, it's how does the political class handle this and try and discuss it with the American people. At the moment, we've had mixed messages, I think, from President Trump. He was clearly very angry in his initial Oval Office address on the night of the murder. And it wasn't the same. It wasn't the sort of rhetoric we heard from him in the first term, when, for example, Steve Scalise, a very prominent Republican, was nearly died after being shot in 2017. And President Trump had quite a long passage in his State of the Union soon after that, calling for national unity and for people to come together. Well, we haven't heard that so far this time. In fact, he very heavily lent onto his law and order agenda and basically was saying it's the radical left is responsible, and listed several crimes that were committed by extreme left perpetrators, and without mentioning any of the attacks on Democrats or liberals that we also know have happened. For example, Nancy Pelosi's husband was nearly beaten to death, and that wasn't mentioned. So it really now comes down to how he's going to handle it.
And it was interesting. So one of our listeners, Natalie, just messaged saying it was very interesting, just purposeful and disturbing reference made right at the end of Kash Patel's comments, where he mentioned, I hope I'm pronouncing this, Valhalla, which of course is this cultural belief that there's nothing more glorious than death in battle. I mean, that it feels like, as you say, the language is going to be kind of ramped up in terms of the polarization.
Well, there is a feeling among some of President Trump's base, and that he has encouraged that they are warriors involved in a generational cultural clash for the basically I hesitate to say the soul of America, because that was Biden's election message, wasn't it, that we're involved in a battle for the soul of America. But it's that feeling of being warriors. It's the heightened level of rhetoric that exists in America at the moment is super aggressive. And let's not forget, he's just renamed his Ministry of Defense the Department of War. And it all adds, I think, to an atmosphere where I do think tensions have been elevated quite a lot. And it's now whether Trump can... I mean, I just wanted to add quickly that he was asked last night whether he would follow Charlie Kirk's own call for debate and non-violence, and he said he would. So perhaps we might hear a bit more of that from him. That's why I say there's been mixed messages from Trump. That was put to him and he said he would. So let's see how he plays it in the next couple of days, I would say.
A final question, David, where you are in America, what is the kind of mood amongst ordinary people after this assassination? And as you say, these kind of, America's been polarised for quite a long time, but clearly much more kind of raw polarisation now.
Oh, this is a country on edge. I don't think it's quite well understood until at least very recently just how well known and polarizing Charlie Kirk was in America. He was a bit like Trump. He was deeply loved on his side and he was detested on the other side. And it's unfortunately this is really going to ramp up passions on both sides, but obviously especially on the right, who feel that they're under attack. And so will calmer heads prevail and try and calm the situation? Well, we've seen a group of senators from across the aisle, a bipartisan group, come out and say that together that we need to come together in America. But have you seen much coverage of that? I mean, mostly the noisiest voices and the ones that get all the attention are the ones either glorifying in Charlie Kirk's death or calling for very aggressive retribution for it.
Well, look, David, really good to speak with you. Thank you very much for your time. That's David Charter, who is the Times' assistant American editor, joining us there. Let's now get some reaction to that press conference from Turning Point UK, which is the British branch of that organisation that the late Charlie Kirk founded. And they're going to be holding a vigil tonight in London to commemorate Charlie Kirk. Let's now speak with Patrick Timms, who's a spokesman for Turning Point UK. Patrick, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We've just had this incredibly interesting press conference. More news about this suspect, Tyler Robinson, a family member, apparently hearing a confession mentioning that Tyler Robinson had brought Kirk up at a dinner. We just heard there from the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, that this family member had felt that Tyler Robinson had a lot of hatred towards Charlie Kirk. What's your reaction to what you've just heard?
Well, of course, it's still developing, but I mean, these stories sadly are not uncommon when it comes to this sort of thing. What we would say is, and what I will say now, as someone who met Charlie, um, I knew him. I met him 6 years ago at a dinner. Charlie was a peaceful man. Okay, he found a turning point precisely because he believed that wars, such as they are, should be fought with words and not weapons. And now we find that a weapon has been used to assassinate him, and we are very clear at Turning Point UK, this was a murder. We're not going to say he was killed, he was murdered. Okay, he was assassinated. Our response to that, in principle, firstly, is to say what we don't want to see is reprisals, because that was never what this movement was about. What we do, of course, also here, because developments are still going on. I've got the press conference muted at the moment on my other machine. We now know that we think we know who it was. What we would say is that we think the full force of the law should be deployed in order to bring this person to justice. With that said, also, I will use this as an opportunity to highlight the distinction, because TPUSA and TPUK, we're part of the same franchise, but they are distinct organizations. In Utah, there is the death penalty. In the UK, there isn't. So, if you had branches of Turning Point in France, in Germany, and something like that, I would expect all of those branches to advocate for the principles that apply to their own countries.
So does that mean you're not calling for the death penalty if this person is convicted?
We will call for the full force of the law to be applied in the judgment of an American judge. Okay? What we are not going to do is say, oh yeah, we think he should be killed. We are not saying that. And what we are...
So you're not advocating for the death penalty now,
No.
But if that's what a judge finds in America and that's what the sentence is, you'll support it?
Support it is a bit strong. We will go with whatever they do. At the end of the day, what we don't want is to see violence rewarded with violence. In this country, and this, as I say, is a distinction with TPUK, we are in a different country. We don't have the death penalty. We don't actually advocate for that sort of thing. Our position is essentially neutral, but to defer to the judgment of those of others in the country in which the offence was committed.
And Patrick, just before we go to the news, just tell us a wee bit about plans for the vigil tonight.
Yes, so there will be a vigil tonight at 6 p.m. It will be in Whitehall, just opposite Downing Street. Mustering from 6 p.m. From 7 p.m. There will be speeches, and from 8 p.m., well, whenever it goes dark, basically, it will be a candlelit vigil, and anyone is welcome.
Okay. And just finally, before I let go, I mean, if there are counter protesters that come along, and I, this is somebody who's very close to you, and this is a terrible murder, as you say, and I think that is the right word. But of course, free speech was at the heart of Charlie Kirk's project. If people come along and counter protest that, how will you feel about that?
Well, at the end of the day, Charlie founded this movement precisely because he believed in free speech. And the TPUK branch of the Turning Point movement will absolutely espouse those values as well. If people want to come along and say they think it's a good idea that a man has lost his life and a wife has lost her husband, and 2 children will now grow up without a father. If that's what people want to come along and do, well, they are welcome to do it, but it's clearly not our position.
All right. Well, look, Patrick, thanks very much for joining us. That's Patrick Timms, who is a spokesman for Turning Point UK.